Okay, this is going to be increasing chance over time version 2, so let's go ahead and save that out. We will overwrite this existing version 2 that we had. And what we want to do now is take a look at a different way of using an increasing chance over time other than the time base. Time base works really well. It's just with TP there's so many options and so many different ways of doing things. I just kind of want to explore another possible method. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this value to time, and we're actually going to, we'll just duplicate our curve here. So remember, our fade in curve is just fading in from 0 until the particle reaches age 100, when the value to time tells us to interpret at a time value of 80. So it reaches 80 here and looks and spits out whatever value is there. So that's kind of an increasing curve. Now we're going to rearrange this particular curve, and we'll go ahead and rename this operator. We'll call that a custom curve. And we will change its curve pattern so that it starts off really high and then decreases. So basically just a fade out. And what we're going to do is use this as the threshold. So if our, let's see if we can grab it here, our fade in value curve is rising and our custom curve is falling. So right at this point in time, roughly about 40, and you remember that's a time interpretation between particle age of 0 and 100. So that's actually going to be about particle age 50. So right around particle age 50, all these guys are going to, their value is going to exceed their threshold, which is decreasing, and then they're going to go ahead and take off. We're going to take a look at how we can randomize this a little bit differently too. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and just open up the threshold 1 input for threshold. So our fade in value, remember this value that's being generated by the time interpolation of the age, that fade in curve is spitting out values. Those are the values that are being tested. And without that connected, threshold is just checking to see, hey, is this value exceed, is it greater than 0.99? And if it is, then I'm going to output true, otherwise output false. And remember, with threshold, whatever the threshold value 1 is, if inside is not checked, whatever that value of threshold 1 is, the value has to be greater than this value. If you want to check a specific range, of course, you can turn on inside, and even with threshold 1 is the larger value and threshold 2 is the smaller value, it's still going to just test in between those two values. So in between 0 and 0.99. It's not required that you wire them or set those values like this. You can leave them as such. But of course, in our case, we want to know if it is a value higher than 0.99. We could leave the inside checked and set our threshold 2 as being very large, but that's just more stuff to enter by hand, so we just skip all that, uncheck inside, and leave it as this. Okay, enough of the exhaustive talk on threshold. Let's go ahead and get this plugged in. And so right now we're going to go ahead and see all of them take off at once right around age 50. Boom, and there they go. And remember, of course, that's because our threshold, our time interpolation of our age, we've got this fade-in curve that's being looking up values. That corresponding with the custom curve, which is decreasing. That's our threshold. So we have less and less of a threshold that we have to match. And we have a rising and rising chance, or rising and rising value that we're testing against. So right in there, it's going to go ahead and get activated. So we want to actually randomize this now. Time base is a really great way to do that. We're going to just take a little bit look at a different way. We're going to actually set this up and go back to our add multiply, but this time we're going to do it, have each particle generate only one value for its lifetime. And we'll set this so that we don't want to go below 1, remember, because what's happening here is this fade in value. Let's rearrange these so they're a little more spatially oriented. So our fade in value, remember, is that curve that's rising and rising. And so we're going to multiply that against some random value. We don't want to make it too low. If we bring this too low, then what's going to happen is we're never going to be, our threshold value is never going to be reached because it will never exceed 1. So remember, the maximum value coming out of this fade in is a value of 1. If we multiply that 1 by 0.47, we're just going to get 0.47, and our threshold, well, without that custom curve there, our threshold would simply never be reached. Let's go ahead and just hook that up and we'll see that in action. Okay, so these are obviously the guys who did not reach their values. And this is without that custom curve threshold. And remember, the custom curve threshold is setting a lower and lower requirement for the value necessary. And it does go all the way to 0. So that will actually give these guys a chance to be activated, even though this random value can be quite low. Go ahead and set it really low. Okay, so even by like age 70, they're all being activated there. Let's go ahead and decrease our random there. So a lot of this is just going to be modifying these values to get whatever look you're going for. But basically, this is kind of the simple framework of it. We translate their age into a time. That time acts as a lookup to generate a value based on a curve that we want. And these curves are very important if you want like fade out or real quick fade in, etc. And then this random can be used to kind of alter that a little bit. And you can do it, once per lifetime, once per frame if you want. And of course, this custom curve will lower the threshold requirement over time as well, so that eventually everything for sure will be activated. So you see, with random set to frame, these particles are generating a new value in between here every single frame or iteration. And that's going to give them a much higher chance of, when they multiply against that fade-in value, of reaching that threshold. So doing it per animation is going to make it much harder, because they only pick one value and they use that for their entire life. Let's actually get out here to 100, and so at this point it's really just timing that we're going to be affecting of how and when these guys take off. But that's kind of the basics of setting up an increasing or even decreasing chance over time of something happening. And this secondary custom curve, lowering that threshold, will make sure that all of them can do that. Okay, we'll go ahead and save this, and let's move on to the next video.